Do you want to know the secrets that took me from struggling entrepreneur to running an 8-figure company? Well, listen up. Hi, my name's Goose, and in just 4 years, I've gone from broke alcoholic drug addict living on the office floor to building one of the fastest growing companies in Australia that has also been recently recognized as one of the best places to work. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the most influential books that shaped my journey, and that is Good to Great by Jim Collins. In this video, we're going to cover 6 core concepts: level 5 leadership, first who, then what, the Hedgehog Concept, the Flywheel and the Doom Loop, developing a culture of discipline, and the Stockdale Paradox. And the reason we're going to cover these is because these are the core concepts from the book that have helped me most personally, and I hope they're going to help you too. So let's not beat around the bush, let's get right into it. The first concept I want to talk to you about is level 5 leadership. Now, in the book, Good to Great, Jim Collins talked about the idea that all of the companies that went from good to great, that became the absolute industry standouts in their field, all had what he called a level 5 leader. So in this section, I want to talk to you about what the characteristics of a level 5 leader are, so that you can help to identify what characteristics you may already have and in what areas you can develop to become a level 5 leader. Because level 5 leaders are the kinds of leaders that are going to be able to take their companies from wherever you are now, potentially struggling, potentially not achieving everything you want, to being a truly iconic company that lasts. And I think that that is a target worth aiming for. So let's go through the characteristics now. The first characteristic of a level 5 leader is humble and driven. These kind of leaders aren't driven by their own personal gain or their personal status or any of these other kind of things that might come with someone who's potentially got a bit of ego. These are the kind of people who are driven for success and driven for growth with no need for personal gain or personal attention. They're humble, they're selfless, and they always put the needs of the company first. Level 5 leaders are also ambitious for the cause. This means it's not about them. They're there for the mission, for the vision of the company, to see it truly become the greatest version of itself. It's not about them, it's about what can be done to make the company great. And with that in mind, they're often prepared to make the tough decisions that have to be made, even unpopular ones, because they know what is most important is the continued success of the organization. So they're ambitious to make sure they can see the company succeed in the best version of itself. Level 5 leaders also lead with empowerment and trust. That's right, they're not micromanagers. They're not the kind of people you see storming around, barking orders, telling people what to do, getting all up in everyone's grill. They're the type of leaders that trust their team to do the best work and give them the resources that they need to do their best work. One of my favorite quotes from Richard Branson, when somebody asked him, "Hey Richard, what is the secret to building all these amazing businesses? You've got all these companies, several hundred of them, billions of dollars, all of this kind of stuff. What's the secret?" And he said, the most important role of a CEO is to define a compelling vision, hire the best people in the world to do the job, and give them the resources they need, and then get out of the way. And that is an example of leading with empowerment and trust. That is, if you find people that are aligned with your vision, your values, all of this kind of stuff, then give them the resources they need, give them the support they need, and trust them to do their best work, and trust that they have the best interests of the organization at heart. Obviously, monitor what they're doing and make sure that is the case as they go, but don't get in the way. This is leadership with empowerment and trust. Another characteristic of level 5 leaders is succession planning. Level 5 leaders are not sitting there trying to work out how they can sit on the throne until the day they die because they're the only people that can be the king of the fiefdom. It's nothing like that at all. In fact, level 5 leaders are continuously thinking, what can I do to set the organization up for success without me? They're thinking, how can I develop leaders within the organization? How can I make sure that we've got redundancies built in so that if they or if anybody else leaves or if something happens to them, the organization won't suffer? So they're constantly thinking multiple years ahead, developing a leadership pipeline and developing leaders underneath them so that the company can continue to thrive even if they're not there. Another example of putting the needs of the company before the needs of themselves. And the final thing is personal growth. Level 5 leaders are committed passionately to personal growth. Now, I don't know, have you ever met someone who's in a position of authority in a business? Maybe they're even a CEO or a general manager or something like that. And the idea of personal development or becoming a better version of themselves just seems a bit kind of like woo-woo or iffy to them. Well, that's probably not a good example of a level 5 leader. A level 5 leader is consistently seeking to understand the way they operate, how they fit into the world, and how they can be the best version of themselves, because they know that that allows them to show up better for the company and for the team. Again, this is another example of it is growth for the purpose of actually the betterment of others. It's how can they become the best version of themselves so they can better impact the people around them and the company around them as well. And this self-awareness is the thing that allows them to have greater awareness of their own self, but also the other people in the organization to allow them to grow their company to greatness. Now, before we go into the second point, which is first who, then what, I want to tell you why this book was so impactful to me. When we started our company, we had $5,000, no safety net, no backup, no investors. We'd never worked in the industry before. We didn't have a network. We had nothing. And we were trying to work out how to get started and how to make all this kind of stuff work. Now, in the first year, we really struggled in the first few months. Then we started to find some traction and started to grow and started to make some money. But we weren't really building what we would consider to be a healthy business. It was not really going that well. I mean, we were making money, we were growing, we were doing all this kind of stuff, but I could just tell something wasn't right. And I remember one of my mentors at the time said to me, and this really landed with me, he said, "Goose, do you know what your problem is?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You've got no business acumen." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And the reason it hit me like a ton of bricks is because I instantly knew he was right. It was at that moment that I then turned around and said, well, okay, what can I do to get better? How can I learn the game of business? I learned sales and marketing. I'd learned how to make money, but I had no idea what it really took to grow a really, truly great business, which in fact was our vision. So I started going deep on trying to learn that kind of stuff. One of the very first books that I picked up was Good to Great by Jim Collins. This was the book that helped me change the timeline with which I think about business. So rather than thinking in like, how much money are we going to make in the next year? I started thinking about things like, how can we build an iconic company that lasts? What is this company going to look like in 20 years or 40 years? What are the characteristics that we need to build into the business now so that has the DNA to be able to carry on and be a massively impactful company that can have a global reach, global impact, or be the best version of itself, whatever that is. And the concepts in this book fundamentally changed the way that I thought about business. Now, this isn't the only business book that informed how I do business, but it was so formative in the way that I thought about the initial structures, the ideas, the concepts, that a lot of this stuff has carried through into the work that we do today and is part of the DNA of our companies today. Now, if you haven't read Good to Great, some of the things that make it particularly interesting is that it's kind of like an academic study. It's not just someone's opinion. In fact, they got a whole bunch of researchers to analyze over 1,400 companies over a 30-year period to analyze what made 11 of them, 11 of 1,400, which made a big leap and outperformed all of the other companies that they were compared to, what made those companies different. So the study behind this and the detail is really, really interesting because again, it's not just someone's opinion. This is fact derived from research, which allows you to actually have a lot more faith that there's actually substance to these concepts versus someone just coming up with an idea around how they've particularly done their unique form of business. So I found that to be particularly impactful. One of the other things is that the concepts in this book are timeless. Now, obviously things change, times change, decades change, technology changes, but the fundamental core principles in this book are things that will be timeless throughout decades and decades. And so these principles are just as relevant if you are analyzing a company that was existing in 1920 versus a company that's going to exist 20 years from now. And so this is one of the things that I find most powerful because you can take these ideas and you can apply them in a macro way and you don't need to be thinking about like, I don't know, is this still relevant if the latest Facebook algorithm changes? Like these kind of things are going to last the distance in your business. What I also like about this book is that it's got holistic strategies. So this isn't just a like how to make money type business book. This is a how to build a great business type book, which is very, very different. There are lots of business books out there on how to make money, how to do better at sales, this and that and the other. But this book actually says, well, this is what you need to do if you want to build a business that is fundamentally excellent, which is a very different question and naturally comes with very different answers. And I really like that too. And it doesn't just focus on the business side of business, it also focuses on the people side of business, the importance of vision, the importance of culture, the importance of having the right people on the bus. This is one of the things that makes this book unique and really rounds out the idea of how to make a great business. And the final point from this book that makes it so interesting and so compelling is that it wraps all that up with actionable insights. So things that you can actually go and do. So it's not just theory, it's not just concepts, there's tangible stuff that you can read it and then you can go and do it, which is really, really interesting because you're effectively being given an instruction manual on how to create an epically awesome business. All you need to do is go and do the work, which I think is pretty awesome. So the next concept I want to talk to you about from Good to Great is the idea of first who, then what. Or another way of putting this is get the right people on the bus. Now, what this concept is all about is really about making sure you're attracting and retaining the right talent. And how do you know what that talent looks like and how can you you find that talent is a really interesting and challenging question. In fact, one of the things that made our business explode was when we actually worked out how to hire well in line with our values and get the right people on the bus. And this has been a fundamental part of our growth journey. A lot of business owners say things like liabilities walk on two legs, and this idea that, hiring a team and growing a team can be stressful and hard and like it's the worst thing you can do and you should avoid it. I fundamentally disagree with that. Anyone who has that perspective is someone who hasn't worked out how to hire well and attract the right talent. Because if you can attract people like you that are like-minded, that share the same vision and values, you create a place that is full of people that you want to be around on a day-to-day basis. That is an exciting and exhilarating thing to do. But not only that, it creates a far better business. But now the idea of first who, then what is really, really interesting. And I'm going to relate this to how I've actually applied this very, very recently. The idea of first who, then what basically is about first get the right people, then work out what the hell you're going to do, which may or may not necessarily apply depending on where you're at in your business. Because if you are growing your business, you might already know what you're doing. You might already have a product to sell or a service that you're delivering and a vision in mind and all of this kind of stuff. So you might not need to kind of like work it out. You might need to find people that are going to be aligned with that vision. I'll come back to this in that concept in a moment, but I'll actually explain how I've applied the first who then what practice in one of our companies. So we recently started a technology company and we had some ideas on how we thought we were going to try and take some of the technology to market and sell it. Now, as we progressed, we kind of realized that actually wasn't going to work, which kind of made us look around and go, well, what are we going to do now? So rather than trying to work out the what, we said, well, let's get the who. Let's find the best people that we can that are aligned with our values, that are aligned macro with our mission and our vision and our culture, and have the skills and attributes to help work this out. Let's get them, the right people on the bus, then let's work out where we're going together. That is the who, then the what. On that basis, we're now developing our go-to-market strategies in a way that are fundamentally better than anything that I could have done on my own had I not sought out the best talent possible and got them on the bus in the first place. So this can be a really powerful thing to do, particularly if you have the capital that is going to allow you to hire people in the first instance. Now, if you don't have capital, another way you can do that is by sharing equity. So you might have heard about the idea of founders, co-founders splitting equity, stuff like that. You can actually help to get the right people on the bus, even when you don't have much money, by sharing in the rewards of the business by giving them an option to secure some equity in the company over time. Now, if you're interested, we can record a whole video on that. That's a whole interesting concept, but that's just a thought that I had on this topic. Now, this is a topic that I'm also really passionate about because we went from a team of 4 to a team of 85 in 18 months. We did all of that without any venture capital, without any funding, without any outside investors. So to do that, we had to build scalable hiring and onboarding systems that ensured we were only going to get 18 players, get the right people on the bus, which we have done very, very successfully. We've got a very low turnover rate, really high retention rate. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, we've recently been recognized as one of the best companies to work at in Australia, which is a testament to the individuals in the business and the culture that we have. So this idea around getting the right people on the bus is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And so I get asked by business owners all the time, how do you hire? I can't find good people. I can't do all of this kind of stuff. And it's actually not that hard. You see, if you hire for values and train for skill, then you're more likely to get the right people on the bus. And if you get the right people on the bus, you might accidentally get them in the wrong seat, but it's easier to get them to change seat than it is to get the wrong person off the bus again. Hiring the wrong person in your company can cost you, I've heard, up to 3 times their annual salary just in hiring the wrong person. Whereas getting the right person, but accidentally getting them in the wrong seat is going to be nowhere near as difficult and challenging because you already know that they are the right type of person to be in your organization. And in fact, you will fight to keep them. And that is a really interesting way to think about how to know who should stay in your business. The final point on this before we move on is getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people that are aligned with your vision and your values and your mission, the characteristics that you really want in your team, all of that kind of stuff gives you flexibility and adaptability. Because if you have the right people on the bus, they're going to be ready to make the changes that are going to be required as you continue to navigate your business growth journey. Sometimes, particularly when you're an early stage business, you've got to pivot, you've got to move, you've got to shift. It's definitely going to be a roller coaster. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. And if you have the right people on the bus, they're going to move with you. Even if you have to completely change direction, they're going to say, okay, cool, let's go in that direction now, because you're going to be operating as a team. And so getting the right people on the bus, first who, then what, is an amazing way to think about growing your team in a way that is going to strengthen your business and give you greater flexibility, adaptability, and growth. Getting your people and culture right is one of the biggest strategic advantages you are going to ever create. Creating a competitive advantage is really, really difficult, particularly if you have other people in your industry doing similar things things to you. But one of the biggest advantages you can get is to have the right people on the bus. They're going to help you find new ways to break new ground and continue to grow, so it's not always on your shoulders. So we have 3 core competitive advantages in our main business, and that is our client-first focus, our team and culture, and our technology advantages. And the team and culture has been one of the biggest competitive advantages that we've had over the last few years and has helped us to have the most amount of growth. So just something to keep in mind. The next concept that I want to talk about is the Hedgehog Concept. Now, it's got a bit of a funny name, so I'll explain the name so we can get the context. So Jim Collins based the Hedgehog Concept on this idea that the most successful companies, the ones that stood out, the ones that were the outliers, had one core competitive advantage or defensibility, much like the hedgehog. Now, the hedgehog's singular defense mechanism is to curl up in a ball with its spine sticking outwards. That's it. But that is an extremely effective approach that serves it very well. So he took this idea, called it the Hedgehog Concept. Now, really what we're trying to say here is simplicity and focus. The companies that perform the worst over time are the ones that are distracted, that have entrepreneurial ADHD, that are thinking about all these different things that they can create and do and monetize. And look, there is a time and place for that in the journey of the business. But most companies struggle with this and really shouldn't be doing it. And in fact, I was talking to a company recently that was doing less than $1 million a year and had 3 completely different business units, completely different operating models, monetization models, team and skills, qualifications, the whole thing, effectively 3 separate companies. When really, if they focused on one core focus, they will actually go further and faster and better over time. And then later on, when they're starting to really get depth in the market, they can think about how can they evolve their services. But one of the most important things you can do is you should always optimize for simplicity. Now, I haven't always done this well, just to be super clear. I am an entrepreneur. I think of ideas. I like to do different things. But as we've progressed in our journey, as we've become bigger and more successful, I've actually been leaning harder and harder and harder into what is the minimum number of things that we can do to achieve our objectives? What are all of the ways we could do things? And should we just try and do them all because what if some of them don't work and all of this kind of stuff? A scattergun approach, it is how can I do the fewest things possible to achieve the highest level of greatness? This is really the essence of the Hedgehog Concept. But there's a little bit more to it, and I actually really like the way that this is broken down. So it's broken down into 3 concentric circles that overlay effectively in a Venn diagram. Now, the 3 circles are what are you passionate about, what can you be the best in the world at, and what drives your economic engine. So I'll explain these concepts briefly, and you can dig into the book if you want to know a little bit more about it. The first circle represents what are you most passionate about. So this should probably encapsulate your purpose or your mission or your vision. These kind of underlying principles. Why are you even in this business? Why are you even doing what you're doing? What is it all about? Now, I can tell you, if you write make money in that circle, you're probably missing the mark. A great company needs to be driven by something more than just making money. In fact, all of the companies that I've ever seen that have been run by entrepreneurs who just want to make money typically hit a ceiling. There's a distance you can go and, you can make some good money. Happy days. But unless there's something underlying that, something more meaningful, some kind of change you want to create, some kind of impact you want to have, not only will you limit your capacity to grow, you will struggle to find the kind of people that you want on your team that are going to help you grow that business. Because what people need is they need a vision to rally behind. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to get the right team to follow you on that journey. So working out what are we most passionate about. So in our companies, we're always driven by impact, the change we want to make. That helps people to understand and make decisions based around that. So what are you most passionate about? That's the first circle. The second one is what can we be the best in the world at? Now, this is a really interesting question because let's say you're a real estate agent, for example. You might say, we can be the best real estate agency in the world. You really got to ask yourself, is that true? Like, do you actually really think you could be the best? And how would you define the best? It's a really interesting question, particularly if you are in a market where there are a lot of other companies that are like your own. So a better way to think about this is what uniqueness could you lean into that you could genuinely be the best at? So for example, if you're a real estate agent, and this is just an example, maybe you could be the best in the world at selling tropical islands to high net worth individuals. Now that's a niche that's probably not that saturated, and perhaps you could in fact become the market leader in that space. And that's pretty interesting. Now you can apply that to any industry that you're in. Even if you've got a retail store or an online business, work out what is your uniqueness and what is your niche. Now I'll rephrase that just a little bit because finding your niche is also still different from finding your uniqueness. You might have a niche that is, for example, business owners, but you might be the best in your field at strategy. So rather than say having a marketing agency, we're the best in the world at running Facebook ads, guess what? You're probably not, you might be the best in the world at defining a high ROAS strategy for entrepreneurs in Australia doing less than $3 million in revenue, something like that. So you can find the piece there. The piece in there is not the niche, which is entrepreneurs in Australia doing less than $3 million in revenue, but it is the best in the world in defining a high ROAS strategy. So leaning into that and understanding what your uniqueness is allows you to work out how to lean deeper into it and continue to build that competitive moat, which is really, really important over time. And the third circle is, what is your economic engine? So what are the key profit drivers in your business? Now, you may have a business that's doing some revenue and you might be like, I've got to go and create heaps of content and I'm going to become a content marketer and I'm going to do all this kind of stuff. But in fact, you might realize the key economic engine in your business is actually client-based referrals, in which case you could lean more deeply into that and understand that that is the thing that drives your success. So then instead of having a strategy that's based around how to create content external, which could still be a good idea, you would actually then focus on, well, this seems to be our major economic engine, getting referrals from clients. What could we do to enhance that? Could we make the client experience even better? Could we find a way to accelerate the referral basis of clients? Something like that. So if you can actually identify what is the key lever, what is the key profit driver in your company, what is the core mechanism that drives your revenue, your growth, and your profits, then you can start to strip away all of the other stuff. Now, this is really good for removing kind of all of that shiny objectitis. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. Should I start a podcast? Should I start a YouTube channel? All of these kind of things. It can help refine that and go, well, is this going to serve this core economic engine? And if not, is it appropriate for me to be doing it if the goal is to grow my company? So it's a really good clarifying element too. And so when you layer those three concentric circles over the top of each other, you're going to find an overlapping piece in the middle of that Venn diagram, and that is your sweet spot. That helps you to identify what are you most passionate about, what can you be the best in the world at. You might not be the best at it now, but you have an opportunity to do that, and what drives your economic engine. Once you can identify that, it really drives a lot of discipline and focus in your thoughts and your actions, because it helps you to refine the way you think about the things that you should do and where you should focus in your business. It allows everyone on your team to understand, well, what are the things that we should be focusing on? How do we all stay aligned with the direction and the vision that we need to go in line with our Hedgehog concept? And discipline and focus is one of the best things that you can do to continue to drive your business faster. And ultimately, if you can stay aligned with your Hedgehog concept, and if you can stay aligned with discipline and focus, this is going to lead to significantly greater long-term success. In the first instance, you may have to say no to some kind of short-term money-making concepts, but this is going to drive greater long-term growth. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, this book really helped me to shift my focus to take a longer-term view. And in my experience, the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones that are thinking 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years ahead, because they're taking a longer-term view to their decision-making, and that drives better outcomes over the long term. So I hope you take this on board, and I hope this helps you too. The next concept I want to talk to you about is the flywheel and the doom loop. Now, these two ideas are the opposite of each other, and I'm going to talk about the flywheel first. What a flywheel is a metaphor for a self-reinforcing mechanism that effectively creates faster and faster growth over time. So let me give you an example using Amazon. So Amazon's flywheel has 5 key parts. First one is lower prices. Lower prices leads to more people visiting Amazon because they can get better deals. When more people are visiting Amazon, there's more traffic to the site, which attracts more third-party sellers, which increases the amount of products that are available on Amazon, which then allows for more things to be sold, which increases revenue per fixed cost, which increases profitability, which means that they can offer lower prices on more things, which attracts more people to the website, which attracts more third-party sellers, which means they can make more revenue per fixed cost, which means that they can continue to drive lower prices and more convenience. This flywheel is self-reinforcing and is actually the secret behind why Amazon has grown to be such a big company. Now, another way to think about a flywheel is, imagine you're at a carnival and there's a big merry-go-round, and we all know what they are, we've all seen them, but imagine it's not moving and you want to get this thing going, and it's really heavy and it's like hard to move, and you lean into it and you're pushing as hard as you can, and in the first instance, it's going to be really hard. You're going to feel like you're pushing and nothing is happening, there's no momentum, and you're getting nowhere, and you're sweating, and it's all hard work, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is going nowhere, and then you suddenly feel a little bit of movement. Then the merry-go-round starts to move. As you start to get more momentum, it starts to get easier, not instantly, but over time. And you keep pushing and you keep pushing, and it gets easier, and it starts to spin faster, and it starts to go faster. And then all of a sudden, it's spinning by itself on its own momentum, carried by its own weight. And all you need to do is stand next to it and give it a flick of the hand. That is effectively a flywheel in action. And here's the thing about flywheels. In that little example I just gave you, what was required was consistent effort. If you started pushing the merry-go-round and you started to get some momentum and it started moving a bit and you were like, oh, it's finally moving, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to take a break. Guess what? The momentum's going to fall away. But if you applied consistent momentum into that flywheel over time, it will eventually get to a point where it requires less and less effort. Not no effort, but continually less effort. But what is really important here is apply consistent effort, because if you stop at any point, it will start to lose momentum. So the consistency is a really core part of the flywheel to continue to reinforce the mechanism. There's also no shortcuts. You don't get halfway through and think, aha, I've got this idea that's suddenly going to spin it heaps faster. It takes time. There's no magic bullet. There's no kind of, quick fix that's going to allow this thing to spin faster. Now, some flywheels spin faster than others, but it doesn't mean that you should be going to try and find a shortcut, because it probably doesn't exist. The best things are going to compound over time. The best things are going to start to develop network effects over time. This is what is going to help to form your flywheel and allow it to continue to grow. And creating a flywheel is one of the most important things you can do in your business to create long-term success. If you don't have a flywheel, you can still find success. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the only thing that is going to allow you to make $1 million or whatever, because there's loads of ways you can do it without having a flywheel in your business. But if you want a sustainable business that is going to last, that is going to create an impact, that is going to grow without you continuously forcing it up a hill, you're going to want to think about how you can build a flywheel into your own business. Now, every business can build a flywheel. That's a fact. But what you need to do is you need to go and actually have a look at your business and work out what is the thing that drives the momentum. How do we continuously apply effort on that? What is the reinforcing loop that we either already have or can create such that it becomes a self-reinforcing mechanism and starts to develop its own momentum over time? Now, one of the simplest ways, if you have a service business, is through client-based referrals. That's a network effect that a lot of people don't think about and don't put enough credit into. And in fact, creating that network effect over time can be the thing that can allow your business to grow exponentially. That is one of the benefits of having a service-based business. Having a service-based business will probably not grow as fast as a technology company or something like that, but they also have a lower instance of failure, and in fact can get stronger and better over time because of those flywheels and network effects. But there are other ways you can think about network effects too. I'll leave you to think of your own, but let's just leave it at that you need to start thinking about how to put this into your company now. Now, the opposite of a flywheel is a doom loop, and it doesn't sound very good, and that is because it is not. And when companies get into a doom loop, it can be really hard to turn them around. Now, companies get into a doom loop when there's typically a lack of focus and a loss of momentum. The lack of focus is usually because the business owner or the entrepreneur or the board or the company have decided that they want to chase a whole bunch of different rabbits in a whole bunch of different directions, and they forget what their hedgehog concept is, they forget what is driving their core momentum, and they forget all of this kind of stuff and start chasing shiny objects. Now, this lack of focus is actually what causes a loss of momentum, because the organization as a whole doesn't know which direction it is trying to go. Now, imagine if you had an organization of 50 people all pushing one merry-go-round. Do you think that that merry-go-round is going to go faster and continue to flywheel and spin better over time? Pretty much. I would say yes. Now, imagine if you had all 50 of those people and you said, hey guys, there's 50 merry-go-rounds. They're all somewhere. Let's all go find one each and let's go see what we can kind of do each. What is the likelihood that that first merry-go-round, the one that is spinning really, really well right now, is going to start to lose momentum? I think it's pretty likely, because you're going to have less people driving it in the direction it needs to go. And this is the idea of a doom loop. This is when businesses start to decay. There's another book that Jim Collins wrote called How the Mighty Fall, which kind of goes into this concept a little bit more and explores how these great companies started to fail over time because they lose momentum and focus. This is a doom loop. It is a downward spiral of a company that ultimately leads to death. So whatever you do, you want to try and avoid that. And if you do find yourself in a doom loop, because it can happen, the best way to think about how to get yourself out of a doom loop is to think about how you can build a new flywheel or reinforce an existing flywheel so you can start to change the momentum and turn it back into an upward spiral. The next thing I want to talk about is developing a culture of discipline. And when I say a culture of discipline, no, I do not mean a culture of authoritarianism and rules run by a dictator who's telling everyone what to do. That is not discipline. Discipline is internal. Developing a culture of discipline is actually about developing a culture that is hardcore focused on making sure it is aligned with its mission, vision, values, and focus, and driving in the same direction together. And they all share the same level of discipline to wanting to seek excellence and to stay on the path. So some of the characteristics of a culture of discipline are having a team that is highly aligned with the culture, the mission, and the values, and who self-reinforce that, which is another type of flywheel. When your team actually say, should we be doing this? Is this actually in line with our goals and our objectives and our purpose? That is how you know you have a culture of discipline. Now, I'm really proud that we've developed a culture like that, and it is really fantastic and awesome to be a part of. And so you want to think about how do you reinforce enforce those kind of mechanisms and develop that self-discipline in the team so it can be self-regulating along the way, and you're not the only one trying to shepherd it on its path. Operational excellence is another characteristic of a culture of discipline. Now, operational excellence can transpire in a bunch of different ways. That could be things like efficiency, but it can also be things like client experience. It can be all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, the way that I like to think about it is a consistent pursuit of excellence. It is the idea that everyone is striving to be the best version of themselves and to help the company become the best version of itself. It is a culture where everyone is looking and asking things like, how can we improve this outcome? That is what I consider to be consistently in the pursuit of excellence and in line with the idea of having a culture of discipline. The final concept I want to talk to you about from good to great is the Stockdale Paradox. And in fact, this is probably my favorite. The Stockdale Paradox is named after a guy named James Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war, but despite all of the torture and all the challenges he faced, he still remained resilient and optimistic that he was going to see the light of day at the end. And that was one of the reasons that he outlasted all of his other people in the prisoner of war camp. Now, the way that I like to think about this is facing the brutal facts with unwavering optimism, which is a really powerful way for you to operate your company. Another way to think about this is pragmatic optimism. That is one of the things that I like to try and develop in all of our companies and all of our teams is this idea of pragmatic optimism. Blind optimism is not going to get you anywhere. That's the idea that everything's going to be great. It's all roses. Like, we don't need to look at the numbers. Like, everything's just going to be wonderful. It's going to be no problems. That is going to end up with you driving your company into a ditch. That is not a good idea. Pragmatic optimism says, well, let's look at the situation as it is. Let's confront the brutal facts, no matter how hard that is. Let's make the tough decisions. Let's understand our weaknesses, but let's also never lose sight of the fact that we are going to win. This idea is the core thing that allows you to drive ongoing, long-term, committed success, even when the shit hits the fan and the chips are stacked against you. Pragmatic optimism is one of the best characteristics that you can develop as a leader and that you can instill in your teams if you want to drive your company to long-term success and you want to have a company that is strong and stable and that is going to be able to weather any kind of storm. If you can develop this in your culture, you'll also have a culture where you can be brutally honest with your team. And no, that doesn't mean that I think you should go and just start telling people, hey, I hate your jumper. And just that's brutal honesty. What I mean about that is you can actually be real with your team and you can say, hey guys, let's look at the financials together because this thing isn't going as well as we thought it was going to go. Versus some kind of plastered approach where you try and paint the picture that everything's great and everything is just a facade, because it very rarely is always great. You can have amazing moments and an amazing time, but until you can share the brutal facts, until you can face the brutal facts yourself, then you're never really going to be able to build a great team and culture. That's my opinion. So building pragmatic optimism within yourself and your team is one of the best things that you can do. And that's why the Stockdale Paradox is one of my favorite concepts from good to great. So I know we've covered a lot in this video, so let's do a quick recap. The first concept we covered was level 5 leadership, which effectively outlined the key characteristics that you need to develop as a leader or within leaders in your organization to ensure long-term leadership success. Then we talked about first who, then what, the idea of getting the right people on the bus. And then in fact, if you can get the right people in line with your values, your vision, and get the right team around you, then you can pretty much overcome any challenge together. Then we talked about the Hedgehog Concept, the idea of aligning the thing that you're most passionate about, the thing that you can be the best in the world at, and your economic engine to drive focus and long-term organizational success and growth. Then we talked about the flywheel and the doom loop and how to build momentum in your organization and how to avoid getting into a downward spiral. And then we talked about developing a culture of discipline and how that can be one of the most impactful things you can do within your organization, and also some of the key things to look for when you're trying to develop that culture as well. And finally, we talked about the Stockdale Paradox, or as I like to think about it, pragmatic optimism, the idea of facing the brutal facts with unwavering optimism about the future. So I hope this video has been helpful. As I mentioned a couple of times, this book was transformative in my own business journey, and I hope these ideas and concepts are valuable to you. And I encourage you to take some of these away and start to apply them in your own business so that you can have better business success, which is ultimately what I want for every single one of you. So let me know in the comments if you've applied any of this or if you're planning to, because I'd love to hear from you and sharing that journey with you as well. And if you want more content like this, if you want to learn how to build a better business, grow your wealth, live a life by design, have a lot more fun whilst doing it, then this is what the channel's all about. So I encourage you to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.